Doug, what is decolonisation? What does it mean?
Decolonisation refers to there's broadly speaking, two different things. Decolonisation refers to, in the historical sense, the dissolution of the European empires, in particular French and British empires, and the emergence and state formation in the global south amongst formerly colonized states. So, from Vietnam, the dissolution of French imperialism in Vietnam, and then the war, and then the Europeans went in to Africa, to Asia, etc. So you've got a political decolonizing process, which is one thing. I don't really cover that in the book. So for me, I understand decolonizing. I look at the ideology and the discourse in particular in the modern day. And obviously we're sort of way past the process of decolonization in the formal political sense. And I don't take any position on that in the book, although, I think, so I don't take any position on that in the book. So what I cover in the book is the contemporary ideology of decolonization, and what it essentially argues is that Western civilization, and in particular, and also the institutions within Western civilization, in particular the Anglophone institutions in the Anglophone world, are fundamentally imbued with a kind of a colonial and racist and kind of in the patriarchal and sexist. Essentially, it's kind of all the sort of shibboleths of the left. Essentially. And so these institutions are characterized by this ideologically. And it makes a number of claims. The first major claim it makes is that decolonizing ideology imposes its will upon the world. So it doesn't see that, it kind of rejects the Western concept of truth and objectivity and science. So the process of in the university, for example, the process of academic exchange is not about the uncovering of truth and, a kind of a synthesis of different types of arguments and which one works best, which is never perfect, by the way, but then you move beyond that, etc. It's not about that. Ultimately, it adopts a postmodernist position of truth, which essentially says there is no such thing as truth. Essentially, the regime's discourses, epistemes, and it kind of draws on a Nietzschean conception of truth, where sort of truth is about a will to power almost within the episteme and discourse themselves, and they impose themselves upon the world, rather than knowledge being about uncovering what the world is. An ontological claim is an epistemological claim, i.e. there are different knowledge regimes which impose themselves. It's not interesting as truth, it's not interesting as the real world. And so when you see the world like that, all truth and social life becomes sort of based around the imposition and power imposition of different regimes of truth. And so the claim from the decolonizing ideology is that the Western imperialism wasn't just about formal colonial or geopolitical colonization, territorial acquisition. It was also about the imposition of a way of understanding the world. And although that may have ended formally with the dissolution of the European empires, that continues to have a legacy, and very profound legacy effect today. So it draws from thinkers like Edward Said and Jacques Derrida. We talk about this kind of post-colonialism. And so Derrida and Said, who was a disciple of Derrida and Foucault, says that Western philosophy is fundamentally predicated around a binary system. And so you've got, in this binary system, you've got good versus evil, men versus, women, black versus white, these kind of civilized, uncivilized. And so within these binaries, there's a power hierarchy. It's sort of colonized and colonized. And so the principal mechanism, political process of contestation on the part of decolonizers, and we see this very strongly with Hamas and the anti-Israel protests, etc., is this process of political contestation of truth, Western ways of being, Western ways of knowledge. And that's the political. If you can overturn this, destroy it, if you can deconstruct it, then you'll ultimately liberate humanity from this Western colonial scientific rationalist mindset. And then truth will be thrown up in the air, and ultimately the human will become the act of becoming. You'll become your true self, or you'll be liberated from regimes of truth and this kind of thing. So fundamentally, at the heart of this is a rejection of science, rational adjudication of truth claims, and in particular, kind of ontological primacy, i.e., the world as point knowledge is to understand the world as it is, And instead, it centers what we call social constructivism, i.e., the world is socially constructed by these ideologies and discourses. So again, the political moment in this is by understanding the contingent and relative nature of truth and knowledge. And by understanding that, you deconstruct it, and a new liberation world will come out of this, where we will all sort of sit around the campfires, I guess, in Gaza Strip or, Brighton or wherever you want to be. And we'll all sort of be a liberated humankind. So essentially, I'll shut up in a minute, but kind of, so the end, once you realize that it's all contingent and it's in imposition, then you free yourself from the shackles of Western scientific knowledge, and then religion will fade away, colonialism will fade away, institutions will fade away. And I guess we'll just become this kind of unified morass of humanity with no nations and states. I guess it's like a John Lennon moment, I can imagine, that kind of thing. That's a kind of way of seeing it. That's what they claim.
The power element sitting at the heart of that, I suppose that becomes the biggest worry if people see the world as being only about power relations. It gives a bit of a clue as to how those advancing the agenda will act when they're in power. And I know you use him as an example in your book, Frantz Fanon, and talk about how influential he was to decolonisation. And I came across a quote of his, which just goes to show that the liberation isn't necessarily for everyone. And the quote goes, "The enslavement, in its strictest sense, of the native population is the prime necessity. For this, its systems of reference have to be broken. Expropriation, spoliation, raids, objective murder are matched by the sacking of cultural patterns, or at least condition such sacking. The social panorama is destructured, values are flaunted, crushed and emptied." I mean, that is quite a chilling,
bleak, isn't it?
Chilling quote. Yeah. That's who's bleak. Going up against the wall for those who are disagreeing.
Yeah, but what gets me about that, and then you see it very strongly now amongst kind of, I guess, radical chic posers running around, protesting, doing X, Y, Z. What you saw this on October the 7th, following October the 7th, and this kind of, and essentially this is what decolonisation looks like. So, well, if you want to go that way, then so what you're saying basically is you want to kill people, you want to murder people because you designate them as the ultimate oppressors. Well, what's to stop these people saying, well, tell you what, if you're going to come for me, I'm going to come for you. I'll kill you first. You see what I mean? That's where I want to take it. So what? So if these protesters now on campuses and goodness knows well on the streets, they're basically saying, we want to kill you, or these are justified acts of liberation. And I don't buy your historical narratives, by the way. Then it's game on, right? It's game on. If you're saying you want to deconstruct the West and Western civilization is fundamentally beyond the pale, and so where is that going to take politics in the West? And this is especially so when we can come onto this if you want, right? A big part of what I do it in the book as well, but it's a big part, forms a large chunk of my thinking. So I think a lot of this stuff that you see is really it rests on an institutional and a kind of geopolitical dispensation that you saw during the Cold War with the victory over communism, but then in particular post-Cold War period where you had the unipolar American moment, right? You had the emergence of American unipolarity and globalization. And that in many senses, America's military power settled many of the big issues the states and civilizations face. It kind of created a kind of, no matter how much you may wish to critique it, broadly speaking, a globally interdependent global economy underpinned by American strategic superintendents. So essentially, if you want iPads or you want food on the table or whatever, America's, for example, its Navy polices global waterways and stops piracy, keeps the global international system open, right? So a lot of this stuff people don't realize in terms of what America's strategic superintendence has done. Has it always been amazing? Absolutely not. Is it sometimes imperialist? Absolutely, yeah. Of course it is. Yeah. But broadly speaking, the post-war liberal international order that rests upon America's unipolarity military superintendence has solved many of the collective action problems that bedevil international relations and human civilizations, right? So what we see now is it's very indulgent, and it's kind of it seems to think that the world, absent for a start, is casting the West as these colonial things, right? Again, this is kind of fantasy. Not only have there been numerous empires throughout history, but we've got the rise of China now. We've got China running all over Africa and other parts of the world. The Belt and Road Initiative. We've got Russia's aggression in Ukraine. The idea that history has stopped, the end of history thesis has stopped. So, and it's stopped, and it's sort of set in amber with the Western imperial system. Not only is historically myopic and fundamentally Eurocentric, which is a deep irony given the critiques that they wish to make about Eurocentrism, which is fundamentally completely Eurocentric, completely narcissistic, by the way. But it rests fundamentally on an international dispensation that is predicated on America's solving of collective action, global collective action problems, right? And in a more multipolar system, which I would argue we're very much now entering into, that international dispensation, that settlement is becoming much weaker. And so then what you're going to get, you see it now debates about NATO, for example, America, which is sort of passed more down to the Europeans in terms of the security arrangements in the European geopolitical space. So what you're going to basically see is a lot of the dining out on American power that we've had. States will now have to start taking very, very big decisions in terms of defense, their own security in their neighborhoods. You're seeing, for example, Sweden or Finland have joined NATO. NATO will become much more of an American-like security order in the European space. So a lot of this stuff that we see on campuses, and a lot of this kind of jibber jabber that we see, is fundamentally based on an international system that is now in deep flux, and the structural conditions that allow this dalliance, and I think it's a dalliance, the rise of other civilizational states and projects are far more self-confident than the West. It's a dalliance. So I think that we're kind of, anyway, it's a long way of sort of saying, I think the international system is in deep flux. So this stuff is more redolent of a kind of the new left of the 60s and 70s that's now run through universities, and they've been spouting and producing hundreds of thousands of these graduates. But that world has changed. That world has fundamentally changed. We're entering into a very different international dispensation now.